Right now, as you watch this video, you're using technology invented by a 1940s Hollywood actress. Not inspired by her work, not based on her ideas, actually invented by her with her own hands in her own mind. Her name was Hedy Lamarr, and while the world saw nothing but the most beautiful woman in cinema, she was secretly designing weapon systems between film takes. When she presented her invention to the military, they laughed at her and called it impossible. They filed her patent away in a drawer and forgot it existed. 50 years later, that impossible idea became Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and GPS. This is the story of how beauty became the perfect camouflage for genius, and how one woman's rejected invention quietly built the modern world. Our story begins in Vienna 1914, where a girl named Hedwig Kiesler is born into a world that has very specific ideas about what smart girls should become, and engineer isn't on that list. But her father, Emil, has different plans. Every day after school, Emil takes Hedy on walks through Vienna, but these aren't leisurely strolls through parks. He stops at construction sites where workers are laying foundations, at factory windows where you can see the machinery humming inside, anywhere that machines are doing the work that builds a city. And while they stand there watching, he teaches her to think like an engineer. He shows her how gears transfer motion from one part of a machine to another, how electrical circuits control the flow of power, how every complex system is really just simple principles working together in harmony. While other fathers are teaching their daughters to be decorative and polite, Emil is teaching Hedy that every machine can be understood, improved, and reinvented. By the time she's 12, Hedy is winning beauty contests that suggest her future will be all about her face. But she's also taking apart household appliances and reassembling them with her own improvements. Beauty and brains, the combination that will define her entire life, and the combination the world will absolutely refuse to believe is possible. At 18, Hedy stars in a Czech film called Ecstasy that features nudity and a simulated orgasm scene. The film creates an international scandal that makes her famous across Europe, and it catches the attention of a man named Friedrich Mondl. Mondl is reportedly the third richest man in Austria, an arms dealer and weapons manufacturer selling to fascist governments across Europe. And when he sees Hedy's face on screen, he becomes completely obsessed with her. She marries him in 1933, and within months, the marriage transforms into a gilded cage. Mondl is pathologically jealous about that film and spends a fortune trying to buy every copy in existence so he can destroy them. He controls every aspect of her life, forbids her from acting, and keeps her isolated in their castle. Years later, she'll describe feeling like a doll, a thing, some object of art which had to be guarded and imprisoned. But here's where Hedy's story takes an unexpected turn. Because Mondl is an arms dealer, weapons engineers are constantly visiting their home for business meetings and technical discussions about military contracts. And Hedy, as the decorative wife, is expected to sit there and look beautiful while the men talk. The engineers discuss radio-controlled weapons and torpedo guidance systems and cutting-edge communication technology, all while assuming that the gorgeous woman sitting quietly at the table couldn't possibly understand a word of their technical jargon. That assumption turns out to be their biggest mistake and her greatest opportunity. While they see nothing but a beautiful actress, she's analyzing their problems, identifying the weaknesses in their weapon systems, and beginning to formulate solutions in her mind. She's learning everything she needs to know to change the world. She just needs to escape first. By 1937, Hedy can't tolerate another day of Mondl's control. She disguises herself as a maid and flees to Paris in the middle of the night. Some accounts say she convinced Mondl to let her wear all her jewelry to a dinner party and then simply vanished afterward. Either way, she successfully escapes both the marriage and Nazi-dominated Austria. In London, she meets Louis B. Mayer, the powerful head of MGM Studios who's scouting for European talent. He offers her $125 per week, which she flatly rejects. Then she books passage on the same ship he's taking to New York and spends the entire Atlantic crossing convincing him to increase her offer to $500 instead. Mayer renames her Hedy Lamarr to distance her from the scandal and markets her as the world's most beautiful woman. When her first Hollywood film Algiers premieres in 1938, it creates an absolute sensation. She's a star, exotic, glamorous, desired, exactly what Hollywood wants her to be. But something unusual is happening between takes. While other actors are socializing or resting in their trailers, Hedy is working on something completely different. She's set up a drafting table in her trailer where she spends hours sketching mechanical designs and improvements to everyday devices. Her approach is remarkably systematic for someone without formal engineering training. She identifies problems by observing how people struggle with existing devices, then works backward from the desired outcome to practical solutions. She builds prototypes, tests them repeatedly, and refines her designs based on actual performance rather than just theory. Her fellow actors think this is just an eccentric hobby, something quirky that beautiful Hedy does to pass the time. They have absolutely no idea that she's preparing to invent the future. When America enters World War II in December 1941, Hedy desperately wants to contribute to the war effort. She approaches the National Inventors Council, expecting them to take her ideas seriously. Their response is devastating. They tell her to use her celebrity status to sell war bonds and leave the actual inventing to the men. But Hedy refuses to accept that answer. She remembers those dinner parties at Mandel's castle where the engineers kept complaining about torpedo guidance systems. The problem was this. Radio-controlled torpedoes could be jammed by enemies who simply identified the control frequency and blocked the signal. This made the weapons unreliable and sometimes even turned them back toward the ships that launched them. Hedy conceives an elegant solution. What if the radio frequency constantly changed, hopping rapidly from one frequency to another in a predetermined pattern? The enemy couldn't track it or jam it because the signal would appear completely random. But the transmitter and receiver would stay perfectly synchronized because they're following the same pattern. But she needs help implementing the technical details, so she finds an unlikely collaborator in George Antheil, an avant-garde composer famous for experimental music that used multiple synchronized player pianos. Antheil had already solved the problem of keeping multiple mechanical devices perfectly synchronized in his composition Ballet Mécanique. And Hedy realizes that the exact same principles could synchronize frequency changes in radio communications. Together, they develop a system using paper rolls, just like player piano rolls, to control frequency hopping in radio transmitters and receivers. On August 11, 1942, they receive U.S. patent 2,292,387 for their secret communication system. The patent describes a method for preventing radio jamming by rapidly switching transmission frequencies according to a predetermined pattern, with both the transmitter and receiver following the same switching sequence while appearing completely random to any enemies trying to intercept the signal. When they present their invention to the Navy, the military engineers dismiss it almost immediately. They claimed the switching mechanism would be too large to fit inside a torpedo and too complex to manufacture reliably during wartime. The Navy classifies the patent, files it away in a drawer, and suggests that Hedy should go back to selling war bonds. A Hollywood actress and an avant-garde composer had just solved a problem that was actively costing lives and reducing military effectiveness, and nobody was willing to believe them. As the 1950s and 60s unfold, something interesting starts happening. Military engineers begin discovering frequency hopping technology and implementing it in various military communication systems. Suddenly, the concept that was impossible a decade earlier is appearing everywhere, with developers claiming they invented it independently without ever acknowledging Hedy's original patent. That patent conveniently expires in 1959, just as the technology is becoming commercially viable. Meanwhile, Hedy continues inventing throughout these decades, developing new approaches to aircraft design, underwater navigation, and communication systems. But without institutional support or formal engineering credentials, she can't attract serious attention for her technical work. Her notebooks from the 1960s contain designs that won't be implemented commercially until the 1980s and 1990s. Then the digital revolution arrives, and suddenly, engineers developing cell phones realize they desperately need frequency hopping technology to allow multiple users to share the same radio band without interfering with each other. Wi-Fi engineers needed to avoid interference from microwave ovens and cordless phones. Bluetooth developers use rapid frequency switching to maintain reliable connections between devices. GPS systems rely on spread spectrum techniques derived directly from Hedy's original concept to prevent jamming and ensure accurate positioning. Even modern internet infrastructure uses packet switching networks that are built on the same fundamental principles she patented in 1942. Every single one of these technologies traces its lineage back to that patent everyone ignored. And here's the profound irony. The technology she designed specifically for military weapons became the foundation for global communication networks that connect billions of people. An invention meant to improve warfare became the basis for international cooperation, cultural exchange, and economic prosperity instead. In 1997, the Electronic Frontier Foundation finally awards Hedy and George Antle their Pioneer Award for the frequency hopping patent. By this time, Hedy is 83 years old, living in seclusion in Florida and communicating with the outside world primarily through long telephone conversations. The award citation acknowledges that their 1942 patent provided the groundwork for CDMA, Bluetooth, and other telecommunications technologies. This recognition arrives 55 years after their original invention, and only after the technology has already generated billions of dollars in commercial revenue. That same year, she becomes the first woman to receive the Bowlby-Gnoss Spirit of Achievement Award, nicknamed the Oscars of Inventing. A year later, Austria awards her the Victor Kaplan Medal, a recognition from the very country she fled as a refugee from Nazi persecution. But by the time these awards arrive, the world has already been completely transformed by her invention. Every smartphone, every laptop, every wireless device in existence uses principles that came from her frequency hopping patent. The financial value is literally impossible to calculate. Wireless communication, GPS navigation, and internet infrastructure generate trillions of dollars in economic activity every single year. Hedy never received a penny in compensation, no royalties, absolutely nothing. On January 19, 2000, Hedy Lamarr dies alone in her Florida home at the age of 85. Her death coincides almost exactly with the peak of the technology boom that was built entirely on principles she invented decades earlier. The internet explosion, wireless communication revolution, and digital networks that were actively transforming the global economy at that very moment, all tracing their origins back to concepts she developed in her Hollywood trailer between film takes. Here's what makes Hedy Lamarr's story so incredibly powerful. The world looked at her and saw the most beautiful woman in cinema, a face, a symbol, an object of desire, and nothing more. But behind that face, she was living an entirely different life. Between film takes, she was solving complex engineering problems, designing weapon systems, and inventing the technological foundation for the digital age that we're all living in right now. Her beauty wasn't her limitation. It was actually her camouflage. It allowed her to work in plain sight while everyone consistently underestimated her, dismissed her technical work as just a quirky hobby, and ignored her innovations because they simply couldn't believe that a beautiful actress could also be a brilliant engineer. But they were completely wrong, and now every single time you connect to Wi-Fi, use Bluetooth to link your devices, or check GPS navigation to find your way, you're using technology that exists because a Hollywood actress refused to be limited by what the world wanted her to be. Hedy Lamarr proved that beauty and intelligence aren't opposites, that women could excel in technical fields while maintaining their femininity, and that the most revolutionary ideas can come from the places society least expects to find them. The military called her ideas impossible in 1942. Today, those impossible ideas connect 8 billion people across the planet. Hedy Lamarr invented the future while the world wasn't even paying attention. And sometimes the most dangerous thing you can possibly be is underestimated.
If this story made you angry, if it inspired you, if it made you wonder who else has been erased, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now.
Because if we don't tell these stories, who will? And if we don't remember these women, who else gets forgotten tomorrow?
They can steal credit, they can rewrite papers, they can dominate textbooks, but they can't stop us from finding the truth and sharing it. That's why you need to subscribe to Women Erased. Let's rewrite history together.